How many of you have had a conversation with your doctor about leaky gut and your doctor completely dismissed you and told you that leaky gut didn't even exist? Well, let's check this out. This is from the National Library of Medicine database, and you can see here a quick search for the term intestinal permeability, which is the scientific way we say leaky gut, shows over 18,115 search results come up for the term intestinal permeability when it's searched for in the National Library of Medicine's database. So if your doctor's telling you it doesn't exist, it's very clear and very obvious that they're not staying up to date with current research. Beyond that, if we type in the term gluten and intestinal permeability, you can see here we get almost 2,800 citations or references on that particular topic. Now, why are we using gluten in that search terminology? It's because gluten is one of the most common causes of leaky gut. So again, why is that important to you? If you have an autoimmune condition, doesn't matter whether it's autoimmune intestinal disease like celiac disease, Crohn's, or ulcerative colitis, or if you have an autoimmune thyroid condition like Graves' or Hashimoto's, or an autoimmune skin condition like vitiligo, dermatitis, herpetiformis, psoriasis, or eczema, or an autoimmune joint dysfunction or muscle dysfunction like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, etc. You need to know what leaky gut is because it is the precursor to autoimmune disease, as we're going to dive into tonight. So what does leaky gut damage do? You see here, it overstimulates the immune system. It allows bacterial and viral toxins to access the central circulation, particularly your portal circulation, which travels straight to your liver. This can cause allergic hypersensitivity to foods. It can set the stage for something called molecular mimicry. It's linked to abnormal microbiome, so abnormal bacteria or other microorganisms growing in your GI tract. It's also linked to inflammation of the GI tract, as well as vitamin and mineral malabsorption, so lack of nutrients. Now, if you look here in this image, recently published in the International Journal of Molecular Science, this is an infographic, if you will, on many of the triggers causing leaky gut. So if you look at the image and you look at the triggers above, you can see stress, toxins, pathogens, which would refer to things like viral pathogens, bacterial or fungal or parasitic pathogens, as well as food particulates or drugs, as well as infections. So these are the triggers, right? And you can see in this diagram on the right where it says leaky and inflamed, that's a gap. Now these gaps are not big. This is a blown up picture of a cellular barrier. So these are, think of these as microscopic, but you get these microscopic gaps in your gut lining. And if you follow it through, you can see entry of toxins, pathogens, undigested food particles into the bloodstream results in autoimmune response or food allergies and the development of autoimmune disease and poor health. Now, why is that important to understand? I've heard this argument so many times. Doctors will say, it's impossible for the gut to leak because if toxins actually leaked into your bloodstream or if bacteria actually leaked into your bloodstream, you would become septic and it would kill you. You'd go into septic shock and die. Well, it's not that clear cut, and it can actually happen without presenting as sepsis. So don't take that argument from your doctor because it's not true. Now, if you look at this next image, you can see here, it takes you through the steps, right? So in number one, in that first diagram, you've got what looks like to be a normal controlled permeability. There are no leaks. And then you move over to part two there, you can see a minor barrier defect and dietary and microbial antigens, that's what AG stands for, antigens, can influx. So they can now start permeating in through that lining. And then you go into that third realm, which is increased permeability, so that hole or that gap gets wider. And then you go to number four, which is massive dietary and microbial antigen influx, where that gap is even wider. And this is what leads to the inflammation and the vicious cycle of immune dysregulation. Now, this was published by Dr. Fasano. Dr. Fasano is one of the leading researchers on this particular topic. He's actually at Harvard doing a lot of his research today. He used to be at University of Maryland, but he, again, one of the world's leading researchers on the topic. So we know leaky gut is real. We know it happened. So let's take that topic completely off the table. Now that we've established that there are over 18,000 papers published in the National Library of Health or Medicine's research database, we know that over 2,700 of those papers are gluten related, and we know that the vast majority of scientific researchers have agreed that leaky gut does exist. So we can now, again, move on from the topic of does it even exist. Now, here's a simple breakdown of the way I want you to think about leaky gut as we move forward, because this topic can get really complex, and I want to try to keep it as simple as we can. Poop, food particles, and microbial toxins leak into your bloodstream and poison your body slowly over time. That's basically the way this works. So if you want to keep it as simple as possible, think of it in that way. You can see from this image published in Inflammation and Intestinal Disorders, you can see that intestinal permeability increases a lot of problems. You can see that this inflammation that's caused by different types of bacterial and microbial products can go to many different organs. In this image, you can see the lungs are affected, the heart, you can see the brain is affected, and there's studies showing linkages to depression and schizophrenia, autism, Alzheimer's disease, and chronic fatigue syndrome. You can see the muscle can be affected, the fat cells or adipose tissue can be affected, the kidney can be affected. You can see that the pancreas can be affected, as in cases of diabetes, type 1 particularly, and you can also see the liver, alcoholic hepatitis, as well as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or cirrhosis. So it's not a simple process, and because these toxins can leak into the bloodstream, they now have access systemically to go to all of your organs and potentiate damage. So if you look at this next diagram, leaky gut leads to autoimmunity. Intestinal hyperpermeability, remember that's the term that means leaky gut, leads to an autoimmune response. If you look at the diagram on the right, and in this particular case, we're using grain consumption as the basis for causation of leaky gut because much research has been done on gluten in this regard. So you can see grain consumption leads to a leaky gut, which then overburdens the immune system, leading to chronic inflammation. Now multiply that by time, and you have systemic breakdown of the immune system and development of autoimmune disease. Remember, 70 to 80% of your immune system resides just behind your gut wall. So when that gut becomes leaky, that mass of your immune cells is there ready to become, in a sense, overactive in its attempt to try to protect you. But once the gut's leaking, the immune system burden becomes so great that the inflammation, the chronic inflammation that comes from that over time leads to damage.